Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And big news of the week, of course, is the introduction of the Edencom ships with the Vorton projector and all of the skill books that are currently dropping from event sites and are being brought to the market with massive margins. Prices are still kind of crazy, although for some of the more common stuff, like I think the frigate for instance, prices are dropping to reasonable ranges pretty quickly. I personally, of course, am mostly interested in the cruiser. A faction cruiser is basically, in my opinion, in the sweet spot for an exploration ship. Unfortunately, no utility high, we'll have to work around that, but that's definitely an experiment that I want to test as well. Next up, I guess we can just go and take a quick look at the new Eden store, where we have a couple of sales happening. You have the Luminaire Rising skin for the Vexor Navy issue and for the Ferox that's on sale, and down here we also have it for the Paladin and the Panther. And I thought I'd seen another sale, yeah, right there. The Nyx Ruvner's Request skin is also on sale. Other than that, we still of course have the amazing looking Eden's Hunter skin and Kybernaut Clade skins for deciding to show your colors when it comes to the conflict between Edencom and the Triglavians at the moment. So there's a little bit of stuff if you find the right combination, or of course if you want to show your colors, then you can definitely do that at the moment. But let's just move straight onto the market. You may already have noticed from the ticker that we are going basically down across the board, so I wonder what's happening there. Let's get started with some Plex and stuff, and that is coming in at 2 minutes. Like that. So here we go. Plex in Cheetah, 2.7 million buyers coming in at a little bit below 2.6 million, and we go down just a sliver, almost 2.7 million for the sellers in the trade hub, in the player-owned trade hub, and then basically the same as well, just below 2.6 million for the buyers. So we do have a bit of a pullback on the 5-day moving average on the chart here. We're staying above 2.5 million. I don't think we're gonna break that again, but we are definitely hesitating at the moment in the Plex market. I'm not noticing a very specific surge in volume, so I don't think we're talking about a Plex sale or anything like that at the moment. But yeah, we definitely are back on a very slow uptrend away from 2.5 million. My personal theory, I'm just gonna say it right now, I also noticed that all the minerals are down in price, and I think we'll see a lot more as well. And the reason is that, well, all that new stuff with the Edencom ships, Vorton projectors and all those skill points is forcing a lot of ISK into those new niche markets at the moment, and that is going to probably have an impact across the board, making less ISK available for other purchases, and as a result we probably have a little bit of a decline in demand and a little bit of a decline in price because of that. If I'm right on that, that also does mean that on some items it could be the right time to try to grab them. The multiple pilot train certificate, very same pattern. Last week we tried to break out towards 1.4 billion ISK, and we're all the way back down here. Slight volume increase as well. We're talking less than 1.3 billion now for the sellers and above 1.2 billion for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin, but definitely 1.23-ish. Very close to 1-year low point as well. All of a sudden, interesting to see this drop and this very aggressive selling downturn here in the price for the multiple pilot train certificates as well. Skill extractors next are actually doing a reversal from the Plexes. They're actually going up on the 5-day moving average, back above 300 million ISK. I think here we basically do have a sale that comes into play because clearly the volume trends have been broken for a couple of days. Right now we're talking 301 million, a little bit above that for the sellers, and 290 million ISK for the buyers. I basically think that what's been happening here is perhaps like a little bit of a bigger purchase, buying that bottom that was created by the sale of these 3 days of higher volumes, brought us back towards the 300 million ISK mark. And to me, for an investor, one that has pretty big means, I'm gonna say, because of the volume that was needed apparently, it does make sense that you grab everything that's available below 300 million, for instance, and then that's why the sellers are up to 301.5, buyers up to 289, so they're slowly forced up here as well. I think that's what happened. Investments, people bought everything below 300 million ISK that was available. After that, we have our injectors. Let's take a look at those. Here is the large skill injector. A decline, that is not what I expected with new skills coming to the game, the Edencom ships and things like that. So that's kind of a surprise. 721 million ISK for the sellers, 690 million for the buyers. So you're actually probably able to buy large scale injectors for less than 700 million ISK. That is definitely below the entire chart, would make sense in my book. And as you guys know, I actually already have a first investment in the small scale injector that is also under pressure, although right at the tail end we're heading back for 150 million ISK, but no, 146 million for the sellers and 139 million for the buyers. So you're able to buy small scale injectors probably very close to 140 million ISK, and if you try to generate that on the chart again, you can clearly see that we are well below everything at a 1-year low point. So very interesting, despite the fact that we have all of these new skills, and if you really want to fully train the cruiser and especially the battleship, it is a lot of SP. I thought we would see an increased amount right there, but we're not. That's yeah, quite counterintuitive. I guess what could be happening is that people notice, whoa, that's actually pretty damn expensive. So what am I going to prioritize? Buying those skill books so I can start training them, or should I prioritize these skill injectors? I think considering the price ranges at the moment, it would make more sense for large skill injectors to be invested in. However, it is possible that people just decide that, you know, we can trade them anyways. It's also my train of thought at the moment. Personally, I'm already training the free skills that we got, but I still need quite a bit of time to get the Edencom cruiser skill to 5, for instance. So I see no need to rush into all of those skill books and into injectors and things like that, for instance. And so perhaps that is why if people decide on the same thing, they're saying I'd rather spend my ISK in the skill books so that I can slowly train those up, rather than invest in large skill injectors right now, which, you know, I can maybe not inject into everything that I need just yet. After that, we have our daily alpha injectors that are, alright, going against the trend and slowly keeping an upwards momentum towards 40 million ISK, 38.5 for the sellers and 33 million for the buyers. Definitely different from the large scale injector that's at a 1-year low point, small scale injector as well. Daily alpha injector actually climbing away from that, heading back towards, well, the lower range of a more normal price for these daily alpha injectors. And finally, we've got the hyper cores, you know, that are continuing to stay above 280,000 ISK, but not by too much. Actually, first sellers coming in at 279 and buyers at 265. Here again, I could be, in my opinion, it could be collateral of all the ISK that's flowing into that new market segment. You could say Edencom ships and Vorton projectors with skill books. It is very expensive. It's a lot of stuff to get started on, and I think that that's just basically impacting the general economy in GTA specifically, because that's of course where people do bring their site rewards to in order to try and get those sales off more quickly. I think that's where most of the action is going to be. It is definitely possible that in other markets, smaller markets, we're seeing a smaller impact of the general downtrend that I'm seeing across the board pretty much. Next up, we will take a look at the minerals, but first I need to drink a little bit. So there we go, and that means we move on to minerals at 9:15. And so here, you may already have noticed it from the ticker, but things are accelerating. The titanium chart is landing on 7 ISK, which is back at its previous high average point. We are talking 7, let's see here, we do have to go to GTA then, 753 for the buyers. Alright, little bounce actually from when I was making the ticker, but 655 for the buyers. There is definitely a margin opening up here. In my opinion, large groups of players have found their way towards titanium mining, so these supplies are coming online and are starting to be able to supply enough for the current demand in the game, despite the resource crunch that we have known in 0.0. And of course, a second thing could definitely be that these income cruisers at the moment have forced budgets to be cut a little bit in mineral purchases, and that's why we have a precipitous decline back towards that 7 ISK. We're still above that, so this is definitely not a bad price to be selling at, but if you're going straight to those buy orders, you are dipping well below 7 ISK all of a sudden. That starts to be a lot less attractive than what we've known in the last couple of months. Next up here we've got pyrite, also a pretty sharp decline down to 7 ISK, but bouncing back. That's actually pretty impressive. 763 for the sellers, and first buyers still coming in at 7 ISK. That's actually pretty impressive to see this decline not able to burst through that 7 ISK on the downside, and that we're staying well away from that. Not bad. Here we've got Mexlon next, same thing, also a little bit of a downtrend, but we're slowly working our way back up already. Almost 90 ISK for the sellers and 81 ISK for the buyers. Well, if you look at this 1-year chart, 50% more than at the start of the year. That is still a pretty good price, specifically for the sellers. So this little correction, I wouldn't be too worried about that. After reaching a 1-year high point of 90 ISK, a little bit of a pullback is normal. Some new supplies do focus on that. Some reserves are being unlocked because of that. And being able to stay well above the 80 ISK range is actually, again, pretty impressive. So titanium is really falling out of the norm by taking a big step down from 8 to 7 ISK, while pyrite's able to defend its range, Mexlon is able to defend its range. Let's see what Isogen is doing. Actually, still, again, same thing, yep, climbing up to 30 ISK here, 1-year high point, declining from that. Obviously, that's not too sustainable, but we are still talking 26.5 ISK for the sellers and 24.10 for the buyers. So again, another range easily defended. We're actually around 25 ISK for Isogen, which is again 10 ISK more than at the start of the year. Another 2/3 actually of an increase in price. It's actually pretty impressive, and does mean that titanium is in a pretty weak spot right now. After that we have our Noxium that's actually trying to get back above 350 on the average prices here, 361 for the sellers, 320 for the buyers. So here again a strong performance. That's a really big surprise to me personally. And I thought we would see more of an outflow and more pressure across the board. That does mean that if my theory is right, we could see a comeback in titanium, and holding on to it for at least a couple of days could be actually the right thing to do if you're a miner that focuses on high-sec minerals like titanium. My thinking is it's apparently the first casualty, perhaps because it is by far the cheapest mineral, and so holding off on those purchases might make most sense. And as a result, if it's true that right now the ISK is flowing towards skill books, photon projectors, and all of that stuff, then this pullback may be recovered very quickly, especially if enough players decide to hold on to their titanium until that happens. For me, it makes no sense that we're back at 7 ISK where we started off last year for titanium, whereas pyrite has gained like 100% almost, and Mexlon is actually at a 1-year high point. Isogen has another breakout, and even Noxium is actually working its way back above its starting price range. So yeah, I think for titanium, be a little bit careful. Don't be too aggressive with your selling. It's definitely feeling like a bit of an outlier. Next up here we've got the Zydrine chart that is staying above 1000 ISK. Another very impressive performance in my book. 1040 ISK for the sellers, 950 ISK for the buyers. We have some volumes coming in, but new supplies are pretty sparse. And what I'm personally noticing here is we have a 10% margin opening up between sellers and buyers. We have 20 million here, 20 million here. Much lower amounts of sell orders as well, but these sellers are starting to dictate the average price. You can see that the averages are staying above 1,000 disk, and this is back to the good old, you could say, situation where Zealot is not something that you're mining in HiSec and that you're bringing in small batches of 1 million and a few 100,000 units. No, this is something that needs to be imported. It comes from nullsec, and as a result you've got bigger batches coming in, fewer batches coming in, but it's very difficult to actually grab Zealot from these buy prices. It's going to be a lot slower as well than before, and so now the prices are being dictated by these sellers that have, well, those that still produce Zealot have are gaining a dominant position in the market. Now it becomes a seller's market where they decide on the price, and buyers can have only a limited influence on that. Megasite went up to above 600 disk, pulls back and is now trying to stay above 550. 550, and we go back up to 560 decently quickly here, and then we have 507, 508 disk for the buyers. Still a wide margin here again that has opened up as well, like 10% on the price. You can see a 12 million here, but I am still seeing some of these smaller sell orders come in as well. So my theory is going to be that Megasite still has some sort of backlog, or perhaps some sort of supply line that is still not running out of material, that is keeping the prices depressed. And the real question is, how can Zealot be 1,000 disk and Megasite be 550? That doesn't make too much sense to me. So I personally do think that when this stuff dries up in Megasite as well, we could see an increase in price there. But unless you guys can tell me where this extra Megasite is coming in, why we have like more sell orders in the last 24 hours of smaller volumes, how is this being produced and how is this different from Zealot? My theory is going to be that this will eventually dry up and that we'll see Megasite go up in price. And finally, we've got Morphite that was declining quite rapidly. The main reason for that was that we had found out that in the Edencom Fortress sites you could mine for Morphite as well. So even in HiSec this became available all of a sudden, but it's stemming the bleeding this week. 11,600 for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. Morphite buy prices are below 10,000 disks for me personally. That's where I would start to invest in Morphite for another increase in price. It is different from all the other minerals. It is tied to the Tech 2 economy, and so here it's still too early. This is actually still a price where I think with regular supplies and demand situations that this is actually still an okay price and not like a bargain price or anything like that, despite the fact that of course we have had a very strong performance in the last couple of months. 15,000 disk February and March, and then in April we actually went to 18,000 disk, I think on average, and a high point of 20k. That's 100% increase compared to the beginning of the year. I'm really kicking myself for not slowly stacking up on Morphite, as we actually had a very long buy opportunity well below 10,000 disk for this material, and yeah, I couldn't take advantage of it, which you know, I really regret actually. Next up, the PI market coming in at 1810. There we go. So as I've said, I'm actually expecting some ISK to flow out of markets rather than into markets, and so I don't think we'll see major recoveries here. What is happening though here, first of all, broadcast nodes, we went down to 1.75 million as the average price, 1 year low point. That is crazy low, of course, and we have investors noticing that and taking advantage of it. So you do see a volume spike that is driving the price up all of a sudden, but I think we'll stay well away from 2 million. Yeah, it's 1.83 million for the sellers and less than 1.7 million for the buyers, and that's so new supply has quickly plugged that gap again from 2 million back down. So there is some investing happening because of these 1 year low points, but it is being plugged by supply extremely quickly already. Construction blocks actually slowly going up as well, but not so noticeable in the volume increases, but same pattern. We went to 1 year low points of 7,700 disk, which is kind of crazy. We're up to 8,700, buyers are at 8,500, so there is some demand that has come in, but definitely on on the backs of a 1 year low point, a complete decline to a crazy price. And if I'm not mistaken, I did buy some construction blocks myself. I just unfortunately don't know the range by heart at this point. I am going to fix that. I'm going to go back to putting up my buy orders, putting them in these folders and things like that, so I can keep up with it a little bit better and keep you guys up to date. Consumer electronics, all right, very surprising, actually back up to 11,000 disc on a couple of days as well, and then back on the decline. And we also have a completely dead day and then a volume increase all of a sudden. So that's kind of a weird one. 11,500 to 11,800 for the sellers, 10,300 for the buyers. Still a very wide margin, but those buyers above 11,500, sellers, excuse me, above 11,500 are still trying to get that reasonable consumer electronics price out of it. It's just a little bit below average, but it is not as bad as some of the others. And now we have this wide variation here, which is kind of weird to see. It must be on some days where we really have lots of people just dumping their consumer electronics to these buyers that then can go very quickly below 10,000 disc, and then on some days we actually have people being patient enough and being forced to grab it from these sell prices. So actually quite a bit of volatility, super wide margin, but the sellers are not that bad in consumer electronics. Then we have the coolants that are trying to hold on to 10,000 disc. Yep, 10,300 for the sellers, 9,100 for the buyers. Again, really large margin between sellers and buyers. Quite a bit of supply. Look at that full page in the last 24 hours. So we have continued pressure despite the fact that we try to get back above 10,000 disc on average. We're still not doing great. Cryoprotectant solutions, that is interesting. In my book, we went back to 100,000 disc, which is where we started off about a year ago, and which is the price before the introduction of all of these new implants from CCP. Very noticeable volume spike, so someone must have been investing in cryoprotectant solutions, driving the price up to 127,500. Buyers are forced up to 110,000 as well. My personal theory on this is perhaps an investment already, expecting at some point a Vorton projector implant line to come in. That is entirely possible. Yeah, actually it makes a lot of sense, because I already have that clone that is focused on the Triglavian weapon system, the disintegrator, so it would make sense that eventually that comes in as well. That feels like a very smart investment. Everything you've been able to buy, let's say below 100,000 disc or very close to that, once this gets introduced, and I mean these ships I do think are going to be used in nullsec as well, so these implants could become very popular. You're ready for that, so whoever made this move, very smart actually. You're already costing 20% profit to most of the others that would still want to make that move in cryoprotectant solutions. Enriched uranium, continuing the bad news here, staying above 10,000 disc, but that's really all we can say. 11,000 for the sellers and well, just above 10,000 for one buyer. Most are actually below that. So again, massive margin between sellers and buyers, and definitely well below average price. Integrity response drones continuing to decline on that 1 year low point range. So here nobody made a move on that, unlike in the broadcast notes. Which doesn't really help a lot, right? We saw that this gets resupplied very quickly, but integrity response drones, yeah, 1 year low points. Sellers are at 1.9 million, buyers are at 1.8 million, so we're not down to the 175 just yet. I think if that happens, we'll see that pattern come here again. That does seem to be the trigger price here, so it would make sense that that's something you're keeping an eye out for. 175, well below the entire chart. I mean 2.5 is actually the normal price. If you could do that, that would make a lot of sense. Mechanical parts, trying to get back above 10,000 discs as well, tied to fuel, so that's slightly good news for my personal production, but it's only just 10,000 discs for the sellers, 9,000 discs for the buyers, still a pretty wide margin. And so here we're going to have these swings in daily averages depending on the patience of sellers or the impatience of sellers here. So quite a wide variety, not going to be that easy to actually sell at 10,000 discs, so still not good news. organic mortar applicators, we are again seeing the volume spikes as we reached that 800,000 ISK range, and right now we're at 900,000 ISK, 862 for the buyers, so we do have some buyers coming in, but that's then a very narrow margin. This could be on decline very quickly, in my opinion, but it shows that some people are definitely starting to take their positions in the advanced PI materials markets, and I have some small investments in that as well. Robotics still not doing great, actually back down below 85,000, 87,000 for the sellers, 84,000 for one buyer, 83 for the next, 82 just a couple below that. So this is still showing that lack of demand is real, and yes, the introduction of new items needing their own ISK to flow in order to get that up and running is not going to help with the situation. Self-harmonizing power cores, alright, we noticed it last week that these advanced PI materials were struggling, and looks like we're not the only ones. Another volume spike as we reach a one-year low point of 1.5 million, driving the price back up, but not substantially, so 1.8 million for the sellers, 1.7 million almost for the buyers. So we again have an investment for really the lowest of the low stuff, and I think that's the correct way to go about this. Slowly rack up those super cheap advanced PI materials, and then someday CCP will come out with something new for structures, perhaps even a Triglavian structure or an Edencom structure, or perhaps we can donate advanced PI materials that will be needed for the construction of the site you want to help on. I'm still hoping for that, guys. I'm not letting go of that dream that us miners and industrialists will also have a way to support our the side of our choosing, and that we could, for instance, rack up reputation, perhaps loyalty points and things like that with that side, without necessarily becoming an enemy of the other side by not destroying their ships. And so eventually my longer term vision of all of this is, of course, that the Triglavians will conquer systems and will make their way back to New Eden, that they will become the fifth race, that there will then be like a peace treaty because we'll have to fight the drifters or the sleepers or something like that, and that from then on it'll all merge back into, you're able to go to Triglavian systems, there will be Concord there, you'll be able to dock to their stations, which might look completely unique. So yeah, that's my dream for hopefully the roadmap there. I could be completely wrong on that, but if you think that that could happen, these bottom priced advanced PI materials for the longer term could make a lot of sense. Superconductors are back down to 10,000 ISK on average, 10,760 for the sellers, 10,000 for a couple of buyers, so a little bit of demand coming in here as well, but yeah, we're still well below average. Test cultures was struggling, was actually really struggling to a one-year low point of 5,000 ISK. That was not too lost. I think I also bought some test cultures myself, not sure about the price. We're back up to 9,000 for the sellers and 8,000 for the buyers, so we're away from that one-year low point, but we're again definitely not super high. And then wetware mainframes again continuing to confirm this trend. We went to one-year low point below 1.75. This triggered investors to buy some of that stuff, and so we're bouncing back up. Sellers are at 1.9 million, buyers are almost at 1.8 million, and I did do a misclick there, but hopefully it won't change too much. But yeah, very clearly last week we noticed these declines across the board in the advanced PI materials, and some investors have made their moves. We're still well below average across the board, but the very best purchases at this point have been made, and I think the people that made them could end up very happy in the longer term. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 2830. Like that. Crystalline carbonites, ooh, that's a sharp decline. And are we really below 130? 133, 134 for the sellers, but 128 for the buyers. So if you're able to buy this below 130, you're well below the entire chart. That would already make sense, and this could be the segment where my theory comes to the fore the most. So right now ISK is trying to actually invest itself a little bit in advanced PI materials. We saw that happen last week, but again, how much ISK is there still flowing towards all of these different segments? It's gonna be lower because of the income ships, photon projectors and things like that. And so here we could potentially really have a first casualty. You're able to buy crystalline carbonite below 130 ISK, which is so much below the entire chart that it would make sense, in my opinion, to give it a try. Ferrite carbide also precipitously declined to 120, also a 1 year low point. Yeah, look at that, 120 for the sellers, actually just below that, and 114 for the buyers. This could definitely, again, 115 is below the entire chart, makes sense to give that a try as well. Then we have our titanium carbide. Alright, this is what was last week. Advanced PR materials seems to be the carbides this week. We're just breaking through 150 and we're actually having some a day at close to 128. Right now 141 for the sellers, 131 for the buyers. There's already a little bit of buying happening there. We may just be a couple of days late for the real decline. But you're again buying well below 150. That, in my opinion, does make sense on this chart. And then we have tungsten carbide that's also declining, not yet at a 1 year low point, but where are the buyers at? 167, 175 for the sellers. Here a little bit too early basically, but yeah, crystalline carbonite 1 year low point, ferrite carbide 1 year low point, and yeah, whoever still has some ISK left, I think it makes sense to try and grab that. Metamaterials, let's take a look at those. Photonic metamaterials actually landing on 15,000 ISK, which is definitely a low range, but it is not completely crazy. 15,350 for the sellers, 14,700 for the buyers. That actually feels like, of course, we're suffering a little bit, but it's not the same as a pronounced opportunity like in those first two carbides. Plasmonic metamaterials is staying well above 18,000 ISK, I'm gonna say at this point. Yeah, 20,000 for the sellers and almost 20,000 for the buyers. This to me again indicates that you know, it's the Galente industrial ship line. How are metamaterials still this well able to defend their range, and then these two just fell off a cliff? So again, this would be another reason for me to try and grab these two carbides. We then have non-linear metamaterials that's landing on 20,000 ISK, so that's actually kind of still normal, although we have the first sellers going below that, 19,700 and 19,000 for the buyers. Again, compared to the others, this is still a pretty reasonable price. And then terahertz metamaterials is getting pretty close there, right? Getting pretty close to that 1 year low point, definitely declining a little bit more quickly all of a sudden. 18,360 for the sellers, but 18,200 for the buyers. That margin is closing up before we are reaching that 17,500 1 year low point range. So I think we'll actually bounce back up pretty quickly on this one as well. If you want to take a metamaterials gamble, to me it would be terahertz metamaterials. You can actually just straight up buy that 18,360. I think below 18,400. Yeah, probably all right to try as well. So this is very strange how quite a few of these are behaving in different ways, but for me this really feels like a complete drying up of ISK flying to these two items, potentially 2 terahertz metamaterials as well, providing us with this opportunity. We still have some others to take a look at. Fermionic condensates actually bouncing back above 80,000 ISK here, 82 for the sellers, 81,450 for the buyers as well. Super narrow margin on a below average price, but able to defend that price, not falling off a cliff like some of them. Ferrogel is declining away from 40,000, 39 now for the sellers, 37,670 for the buyers here. This feels like it's a pretty dangerous one because we were in the first half of the year trying to defend 50,000, 45,000 ISK. Then we declined to less than 35, but we never really managed to break out of a 40,000 range. So who knows how low this can go. That feels like a dangerous investment. Fluorides are still staying well above 1,000 ISK, so doing pretty well. 1270 for the sellers and 1160 for the buyers. Bit of volatility at the tail end on the high end, so here again showing that it's not like advanced move materials are being depressed across the board or oversupplied so massively that everything is falling off a cliff. This really does make these two look like a bit of an outlier that are potentially a nice investment. Hypersynaptic Fibers is struggling as well, but trying to stay above that 10,000 disc range, just not succeeding. But 9994 is actually quite close to 10,000 disc, of course. And then those buyers coming in at 9,826, 9,825 with have decent volumes is going to help us stay in this range and not fall off that cliff again. Nano transistors staying at 6,000 disc, bit of pressure but nothing too major. Phenolic composites, and another exception right here, was able to defend that 2,000 disc for most of the year in fact, and now it's not happening. 1620 for the sellers, less than 1600 for the buyers, complete lack of buyers as well. This is another one where you are below the entire chart, and it would make sense to try and grab a couple of these. Now you have to be slightly careful for one of these. Where is it here? Ferrogel scenarios. So it did happen, right? Ferrogel before this, 50,000 disc, declined to 40,000, went to 1 year low point. That was still an okay investment when we climbed back to 40k, but we never went back to 50k. So be a little careful on that, but this is very noticeable. Another 1 year low point. And then finally we get our ceramic fibers that is continuing to struggle. So I wonder if sellers and buyers have found each other again. Yeah, it looks like it. 235 for the sellers, 322 for the buyers, pretty narrow margin. So that's another one that's, you know, able to show that there's still decent demand here, and despite the fact that we're below average on a lot of these super declines, like here, crystalline carbonate, fernite, and phenolic composites really do stand out as basically a drying up of ISK, a drying up of demand for these markets, and could be partly because, as I've said, of the new stuff that is here. Let's move on to the Tech 2 ships then, coming in at 3610. Like that. Here we go. Aries declining again to 1 year low point as well, definitely well below 25 million. It's 24 million for the sellers, with 668 of them as the cheapest sell order. That is going to keep things from rising anytime soon. And then 21 million for the buyers. I think I bought a couple Aries at 22 million. We'll need a little bit of patience on this one, but it is another opportunity to grab an Aries if you haven't done so yet. The Basilisk is actually bouncing from that decline as well, so that is why my buy order at was 175, 185, I'm not exactly sure, no, 175 probably, didn't trigger. It's back up to 200 million already, 185 million for the buyers. So I tried to buy this bottom and I just did not succeed. I was a little bit too aggressive on my price there, and it does show that the possibilities are there though. Keep in mind, do I find one? Yeah, here we go. This is my buy order in all likeliness, 175 million. Now you could have bought very close to that, and then selling at 200 million is already some profit at least, but yeah, buyers came in a little bit more aggressively than what I would have liked. So far that hasn't succeeded. Now another Aries scenario is possible, so who knows. I'm gonna definitely keep my buy order up. But right now it also shows that there is potential in the Tech 2 ship markets. Cerberus went up to 280 million, is now back down below 230. But how close to 200 million are the buyers? That's the real question for me. Very close actually. 228 for the sellers. Unfortunately, if we'd seen like a few hundred of them or a few dozen of them here as well, I would have been felt a little bit more comfortable waiting for those 200 million to also get filled and then try to grab below 200 million ISK. But right now you can already buy Cerberus very close to 200 million ISK. It's your choice. I wouldn't blame anyone for trying to grab one actually. Next up here we get the Crow. Terrible chart because of some of these daily prices, but we are back down as well, just like with the Aries. Right now we're talking less than 27 million for the sellers, and this is a problem, of course. 677 as well, bringing yeah, basically a very difficult ceiling to break through for the Crow. 23.6 million for the buyers. Another opportunity to buy in my opinion. Then the Guardian had that massive decline. We actually managed to buy one for 184 million. We're back up to 209 for the buyers and 189 for the sellers. Excuse me, 209 million for the sellers, 189 million for the buyers. And so here I could already sell at a slight profit, but I'm actually gonna wait for another breakout. After that we get the Hawk. I also did buy 2 Hawks, I believe, and you can see on the chart why. We're at the 1 year low point yet again. 31.5 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers, and yeah, looks like frigates are super supplied at the moment. Another 382 as the second to cheapest sell order. That is again going to keep a breakout from happening anytime soon. I do start to look at these as medium to long term investments, but we see from these spikes here, for instance, that it could happen very quickly in the Hawk, and just one event focused on frigates could definitely bring this one back at the 4 and could create that sell opportunity. The Heretic is staying below 60 million here, yeah, on no supplies. So here again, interdictors, very difficult. I managed to buy one at 52 million, so that is going to stay my benchmark. I would only try another buy order if I can buy cheaper than that, and we'll wait for a real breakout again before we sell. The Hound had a little bit of a bounce back up to 30 million ISK, but it gets plugged very quickly. 26 million for the sellers, 23.2 million for the buyers. It's not the low point just yet, but we're definitely pretty cheap again. The good news is we're not seeing 600, 700 Hounds being brought to the market, keeping us from potentially bouncing again. So here, a little bit of patience for the sale, I think makes sense. The Ishtar went below 230, is right back there. It's just a decently consistent chip. 226. Oh god, excuse me guys, just bounced against the microphone. 226 million for the sellers and 211 for the buyers. It's basically the normal range for the Ishtar, slightly cheap on the buy orders, but definitely very reasonable. Nothing that I would consider a buy opportunity or a pronounced sell opportunity just yet. The Manticore is back on the decline towards 25 million. Now keep in mind 1 year low points are well below that as well, but we went to almost 35 then on the downside, and I did sell it. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact numbers by heart, but I think I bought for 24 million and then sold for 32.9 or something like that. So I did make a Manticore sale myself on this increase right here. We're back on the decline though. 26.5 for the sellers, 24.5 for the buyers. You're buying Manticores again below 25 million, which is pretty cheap on the chart. Supply wise, I'm not seeing anything too dramatic. 37 is a decent amount, but nothing that can't be absorbed. So yeah, perhaps another Manticore trade on this downtrend could be possible. The Munin is actually declining. That becomes potentially a bit more interesting. 210 for the first seller, 224 for most, 204 for the buyers. That's still a little bit too high for me personally. I'd rather see 200 million come into play. After that we have the Nemesis that's landing on 25 million, 25.7 million for the sellers, 23.2 for the buyers, and this is a little bit worse, right? 53, 49, 80, another 28. That's actually a lot of Nemesis, and what it looks like to me is that for the Nemesis, volatility has been declining. Every single time we're landing on that 25 million, we're having a really tough time going well below that, but any spikes get plugged by a lot of supply all of a sudden, and so the volatility is gone. For the Nemesis, I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm going to wait for a real decline, 1 year low point, 20 million, something like that, before I would purchase, and then hope that that eventually happens on consistent oversupply, and that we can then get our volatility back so that we can do some trades. But yeah, the Nemesis, only the very best deals will come into play. Compare that to that Manticore chart where we land on 25 million. It's not the very best deal, it's not the 1 year low point, but at least we still have some volatility going back up to 35 million to try to play with. On the Oneros chart, we are heading towards that 180 really low range as well. 190 million for the sellers, 160 million for the buyers. You know, you could try to grab a really cheap Oneros here. Keep one thing in mind, super low volumes. It's going to be very difficult to materialize the trade. I would never have more than one Oneros floating basically. The Purifier also back under pressure, landing on 25 million. Again, 1 year low point, nowhere near that yet, but 27 million for the sellers, 24 million for the first buyer, and then 40 here, 90 here. It's putting a bit of pressure on the price, but it could break back out. Unfortunately, we do see that decline in tops, so for the Purifier, I would start to be careful as well. Then we have the Saber, yeah, getting back down to 60 million, 59 million on a bit more supply, 55.6 million, too narrow margin to invest. So I do have a Saber, not even sure about the price anymore. Scimitar declining as well all of a sudden, so looks like the Eden Come craze that in my opinion drove the price up to 250 million is already declining. And 180 as the low point. Let's see. Ooh, yes, 190 million for the sellers, 178.5 for the first buyer. Look at the lack of buy orders here. You could definitely try another Scimitar purchase, in my opinion. If you're able to grab it below 180, you're pretty certain to be able to sell it for like 230 at some point in the future. And then finally, the Zarmast is, well, continuing that seesaw movements, actually slightly up, but is not really willing to break through the 400 million mark. 378.5 for the sellers, 301 million for the buyers. That's actually a super wide margin as well. You could even buy this, sell this, and make a profit, but the volumes then, well, actually 25 a day. That's Onero's numbers. That's even more than the Oneros. That is super surprising. Perhaps I should try it. Try to buy a Zarmast for a bit above 300 million and then try to sell it for a bit below 375 or something like that. It could work. Interesting that these volumes are up this much compared to even the Oneros. Alright, Tech 2 ships, some opportunities, definitely seeing some pressure as well. Interesting, right now it's difficult to get the really good sales going because of quite a bit of supply in the frigates and things like that as well. But if you're able, so I would really buy only the very best of deals at the moment. I already have quite a bit of Tech 2 stuff ready for sale. Let's move on to the Tech 3 ships coming in at 46 minutes. Like that, and let's see, especially in the destroyers, if those markets are finally starting to stabilize a little bit. The Confessor is definitely going below 40 million and able to stay at that, I'm gonna say 35 million range. 38 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers, 50 here, 40 here. Last 24 hours, only one sell order. This feels like a much more normalized situation. Reasonable volumes, nothing too crazy on the new supply, being well below 40 million ISK. This does feel pretty normal. Then we have the Hecate that is now also slowly going back below 40 million ISK. 39.5 for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. We still have 280 here, a full page of new sell orders, but let's see if this is also the most expensive one. If we can then drive this down towards like that 37 million, 38 million as well. Keep this or move this down a little bit as well here, then it could still be pretty normal. A little bit worried about the volumes. Then we've got the Jackdaw, very same thing, also going back below 40 million ISK. 37 million now for the first seller, 32 million for the buyers. Is already in that Confessor range, but notice that below that, last 24 hours, still a full page that drives us down from 40 to 37 million, 65 here, 32 here, 33 here. So my read on this is, yeah, the Hecate is going to be the best seller, so that's where supply and production moves to. Confessor is stabilizing at that 37-38 million range for the sellers, bit of margin on the buyers. Jackdaw is doing the same thing, actually just did that. So yeah, this is feeling like it is finally going to normalize, and like we could then try to spot some opportunities, which meant that for me this Vapel was going to a 1-year low point and was potentially a good buy, and I tried to do that. Now we will probably need a little bit of patience. 35 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers, but notice last 24 hours, one order. We've got 12, 22, 15, really not that many Vapels, so it's not a super big margin, but I do think that this Vapel has a slight potential to move back up above 35 million, especially on maybe a little bit of a buying frenzy all of a sudden. I think having bought on this decline right here does make sense for the medium term. And then we're gonna go back, I feel like it, in a more healthy market with supply demand forces that will impact all of this, making it a little bit more predictable than when we had these crazy spikes up to 80 million ISK, up to 90 million ISK, and then the jackdaw went up to 70 as well. That completely threw everything out of whack, but we finally, and it took us here 4 and 3 months, well, 2 months here, to absorb all of that crazy volatility. On the cruiser front, we have the Legion that is just landing on that 130 million low point and is staying there for now. 138 million for the sellers, 120 million for the buyers. You can definitely grab a cheap Legion right now. As an investment, I would never do more than one. Then we get to Loki, also landing on that 150 million range, 169 for the sellers, but 149 for the million. So you're able to buy a Loki below 150 million. Same thing, you could definitely buy one. I have one, I think a little bit above that, but I have one, and that's all I'm willing to float in these. And then we have the Proteus. Is not yet at a 1 year low point, 148 for the sellers, but yeah, buyers below 130. Again, you could really try it. Then we get a Tengu that's landing on 150 as well, 157.6 for the sellers, 141 million for the buyers. Yeah, that's not yet at a 1 year low point, but definitely feels pretty cheap. The one problem that I have, of course, is that all of this is happening on crazy next to no supplies, and then here in this, oh sorry, Proteus, look at that, little ones. So basically a dozen ships is driving the price down from 152 million to 148 million. It's really crazy. This is ripe for manipulation, but when will that happen? Will that happen? That is a much bigger gamble to take, and so that is why I have one Loki, I have one Legion. I'm gonna hope for it to come back so that I can make the trade, which is not gonna be easy because we have very few ships to work with. So we can be massively manipulated with not a lot of ISK, and well, that's actually here in the Loki. Volume staying decently high during that high point is impressive. Same with the Legion. So there is some hope that we can sell at a much better price here, but I'm not going to keep investing in these cruisers either. And then we have the extra product for this week coming in at 5120. And I got a request basically for the Sacrilege and the Zealot. The question is, can you add it to the Tech 2 ships because they're Nosec meta right now? Don't feel like I just want to switch them out. Maybe we could switch them out for like the Ishtar and the what's the other one? The Munin, if they are interesting and volatile enough, but I'm not sure. Let's take a quick look at that first. So we had the Sacrilege. Actually, yeah, also a pretty good PvE platform. I really like the Sacrilege myself. Went down to less than 230 million. We get a little bit of a volume increase. So sellers are back at 235. Buyers are at 203 million ISK. That is very low. You could, I think, try an investment in the Sacrilege. We've got some volatility on this one, so it is kind of interesting. But we don't see super volatility. We do see pronounced 1 year low points here, right? Less than 230 on the chart. Big spike up, getting to 230, double spike right here. We're at 230, volumes are increasing, price is going up slightly, but is this enough to already make a profit on the buyers? Well, if you bought close to 204, you probably, or 203, you probably can. So it is interesting, and right now the Sacrilege is pretty cheap, and it is a very strong platform if I'm not mistaken. So we have missiles, and we also, if I'm not mistaken, have a decent drone bay. Or no, oh, we don't have a drone bay, so it's pure missiles. Oh, thought we had drones on that one. But yeah, it's a great missile platform, it's a great PvE platform as well. So this is interesting. Right now, for being in the Nosec meta, it feels like it is pretty cheap. And then the other one was for the Zealot. Let's take a look at that chart. We actually have a decently similar one, a little bit of volatility, but the low point is clearly 200 million ISK for the Zealot. Sellers are at 238 million, buyers are at 216. We definitely have a decline. But is this enough volatility to, let's say, replace the Ishtar, which I love? That's like a little bit of a PvE and general Tech 2 benchmark. And then the Munin, which is basically the same thing as this, I think. Let's take a quick look at that. Tech 2 ships. Munin. Yeah, even less, even less of a pronounced spike here, or high point in April, May, but it doesn't have that same volatility. Volumes are definitely not good. Volumes for the Zealot have only now started to go up. So, you know, can you say that you had a 300 million ISK opportunity when the volumes are this low right there? I'm not sure. I'm just not really convinced that the heavy assault cruisers are where you'll have massive trades happening. I think the frigates are far more accessible, and the logistics cruisers are far more reliable for that to happen. But you know, if you are of the opinion that the Zealot and the Sacrilege could actually replace the Ishtar and the Munin in the tech-to-ship market range, definitely put that in the comments. I'm open to suggestions, although I keep the final decision for myself. That's gonna be it for this week then, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.